Elias had never believed in curses, only in cheap rooms and cheaper landlords. When he found the old apartment on the outskirts of town, its rent was suspiciously low, but he didn't care. He needed a place tonight. The landlord, an elderly man with trembling hands, avoided eye contact as he handed over the key. Room 7. "Don't sleep with the lights off," he muttered. Elias laughed it off. When he entered the room, a damp, warm smell hit him, like old breath trapped for too long. The walls had an odd texture, uneven and slightly bulging, as if swollen. He brushed his fingers across the surface and jerked back. Felt warm, almost pulsing. He told himself it was bad insulation. Still, as night approached, he felt the air shift, an unmistakable slow inhale, then a deep exhale that moved the curtains though the windows were closed. Elias froze. The room felt alive, waiting, listening to him breathe in return. And somewhere beneath the floorboards came a faint, wet gulp, like something swallowing. That night, Elias couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard it. The sound of flesh shifting behind the walls. Not rats, not pipes, something softer, thicker. It reminded him of someone dragging their palm across bare skin. The breathing grew louder, syncing with his own pulse. He pressed his ear against the wall. It was unmistakable. A heartbeat, slow and heavy, coming from inside the structure itself. Elias stumbled back, horrified. He grabbed a chair and struck the wall. A muffled groan vibrated through the room. Then another. Then a chorus. The walls moved, ripples spreading outward as though the entire room flinched in pain. The temperature rose sharply, the air turning humid and hot, almost like the inside of a mouth. Elias backed toward the door, but it slammed shut on its own, the lock twisting with a wet click. He tried the window, sealed, the glass fogging from warm breath behind it. Desperate, he whispered, "What are you?" The room exhaled slowly, and from deep within, a voice responded. Not spoken, but felt. Hungry. Elias grabbed his phone and tried calling for help, but the signal dropped to nothing. Just static, then a distorted chewing sound that made his skin crawl. The walls swelled inward slightly, closing the space around him. He felt something warm drip onto his shoulder. He looked up. A dark red droplet slid from the ceiling, thick and slow. Blood. Fresh. He stumbled back as more drops followed, dotting the floor like a heartbeat rhythm. The ceiling bulged, pushing downward, veins surfacing across its surface. Something inside was moving toward him. "Stop! Stop!" Elias screamed, but the room only inhaled sharply, pulling the air from his lungs. He staggered, gasping. He could feel the suction, like the room was trying to drink his breath. With effort, he crawled toward the corner, watching as a split opened across the ceiling, like a vertical mouth unfurling. Hot steam poured out, carrying the stench of digestion. Something wet and fleshy pushed forward, trying to emerge. The room was birthing something, or regurgitating it. Whatever it wasn't human. The thing dropped from the ceiling with a wet slap, landing in a trembling heap. It looked like a human torso without skin, raw muscle twitching as if still waking. No eyes, no lips, just a round opening where a face should be, expanding and contracting like a newborn gasping for air. It crawled toward him instinctively, leaving streaks of dark fluid behind. Elias tried to stand, but the floor pulsed beneath his feet, knocking him down. The creature reached him and pressed its faceless opening to his chest, inhaling deeply. He felt his breath forcefully pulled out, his lungs straining, vision blurring. In desperation, Elias slammed his fist into the creature. It reeled back, screeching, a horrible wet sound that made the room vibrate. The walls shuddered in response, as if the entire place felt the creature's pain. Suddenly, tendrils of flesh shot from the wall, grabbing Elias by his arms and legs. The room was done playing. It wanted to feed. The creature crawled back toward him, faster now, its mouth widening unnaturally, revealing rows of soft, fleshy teeth, made not for chewing, but for sucking. The room tightened its grip, the tendrils digging into his skin like warm, living hooks. Elias screamed as the creature climbed onto his chest, its breath hot and damp, the fleshy teeth pressed against his ribs. He felt the suction begin, slow at first, then violently strong, as though it wanted to pull the life right out of his bones. His vision swirled, darkness creeping at the edges. In a final burst of survival instinct, Elias twisted violently, managing to free one arm. His hand landed on a broken piece of metal from the chair. He didn't hesitate. With a desperate cry, he stabbed the creature's gaping mouth. The reaction was instant. The creature convulsed, shrieking, and thick fluid splashed across the floor. The room itself roared, an echoing, guttural moan vibrating through every wall. The tendrils loosened, unsure, trembling. Elias dragged himself toward the door, coughing blood. As the creature thrashed, its body began to dissolve, melting into the floorboards like fat hitting a hot pan. The room howled again, louder, angrier. Elias reached the door and found the lock slowly turning on its own, unlocking. The room wasn't defeated. It was letting him go. Elias stumbled into the hallway, collapsing against the peeling wallpaper. The air outside felt colder, thinner, as if the room had been breathing for him all along. Behind him, room 7 pulsed once, a slow throb like a dying heart. But just as he pushed himself up to escape, he heard a soft, dragging sound from inside. Something else was moving, something bigger. He turned, trembling. The doorway stretched subtly, its edges warping like warm wax. A massive shadow shifted just beyond the threshold, too large to have fit inside the room he'd seen. The creature he fought was only a fragment, something the room had expelled. A long, wet limb slid out across the floor, feeling its way blindly. Then another. The hallway lights flickered violently as the air grew humid again. Elias backed away, but his foot hit something, a suitcase. A woman stood at the end of the hall, smiling politely, unaware. "Hello, is this where room 7 is?" she asked. Elias opened his mouth to warn her, but the shadow behind him expanded, rising like a living wave. The door widened even farther, welcoming its next breath, its next meal. "Don't go near it," Elias shouted, but his voice cracked, weak from the creature's draining touch. The woman frowned in confusion and took a hesitant step toward him, but it was already too late. The hallway lights died all at once, plunging them into darkness. A single, massive inhale echoed through the corridor, powerful enough to shake dust from the ceiling. The woman froze, her breath catching in terror. Then, from the darkness, something wrapped around her ankle. Fast, warm, wet. She didn't even have time to scream before she was yanked off her feet and dragged toward the widening doorway. Elias lunged forward, grabbing her hands, but the force pulling her was impossibly strong, like the vacuum of a living maelstrom. Her nails scraped against the floor, leaving long, bloody trails. "Please, don't let me go," she cried. But the room inhaled again, deeper, more desperate. Her body lifted off the ground entirely, pulled into the black maw of room 7. Elias was thrown backward as the door slammed shut with a meaty thud, and the hallway fell silent. Then faintly, the room exhaled, a warm breath slipping out from under the door. Elias knew he couldn't run. Not anymore. Running meant someone else would walk unknowingly into the same hunger. He pushed himself up, trembling, and approached the door of room 7. For the first time, it wasn't locked. It stood slightly open as if waiting. A moist, rhythmic pulse throbbed from within. Inside, the room had changed. The walls were no longer bulging, they were open, split down the middle like ribs pried apart. And behind them, organs. Living, beating, shifting organs. A massive heart dominated the center, pumping thick, dark fluid through fleshy tubes connected to every corner of the room. As Elias stepped inside, the pulsing heart sped up. It recognized him, its escaped meal. The floor rippled and tendrils rose once more, but slower this time, uncertain. The room wasn't attacking. It was pleading. A voice. Felt, not heard, rumbled through him. Stay, feed, complete. Elias stared at the monstrous heart, realizing the truth. The room wasn't a trap. It was a living creature kept starving. It didn't hunt out of malice, but out of need, and the landlord had known. Elias looked around the living chamber, the organs contracting as though waiting for his choice. The heart throbbed harder, sending tremors through the fleshy walls. He saw something glinting near a corner, a rusted metal hatch partially fused with tissue. Curious and desperate, he forced it open. Inside was a pile of bones, human bones, dozens, maybe hundreds, some chewed, some dissolved partially by digestive fluids. But one object stood out, a journal. Inside, he found the landlord's handwriting. The creature came with the building. It breathes, it feeds. If it is not fed, it escapes its room. Elias's blood ran cold. I trapped it in room 7, reinforced the walls with living material from its own flesh, but it grows hungry faster each year. Tenants keep it docile. Sacrifices keep it quiet. The final line was smeared in dried blood. If it breaks free, it will become a house, a street, a city, breathing. Elias realized there was no locking it away anymore, but maybe he could stop it from growing. Elias stepped toward the pulsating heart, the creature sensing his intent. The walls trembled, tendrils rising uncertainly, almost afraid. The heart throbbed with a violent hunger, but Elias no longer felt fear, only resolve. He lifted the rusted piece of metal, now sharpened by desperation. "This ends with me," he whispered. The tendrils hesitated. Then Elias plunged the metal deep into the giant heart. A deafening scream exploded through the building, every wall convulsing, every organ twisting violently. The floor bucked, throwing him backward, but he held the metal in place as the heart spasmed, dark fluid spraying across the room. The tendrils writhed, not attacking, but reaching for him, almost pleading for mercy.
"I'm sorry," Elias whispered.
With a final shudder, the heart collapsed inward, its flesh disintegrating into ash-like dust. One by one, the walls stopped breathing. The air cleared. The warmth vanished. The room died. Elias crawled out, gasping, as the building fell silent for the first time in decades. He stood in the hallway, trembling, but alive. He had ended the hunger, and for the first time since entering room 7, the house exhaled its last breath. The village of Harrowfield had always been quiet. Too quiet, according to travelers who passed through. The silence wasn't peaceful, but heavy, like a pressure that sat on the chest. No birds sang in the trees. No wind rustled the crops. Even the footsteps of villagers seemed unnaturally soft, as if the soil itself had learned to muffle sounds. For 16-year-old Mara, the silence was all she'd ever known, but even she felt something wrong beneath it, like a heartbeat hiding under the earth. Elders warned children never to wander outside after sundown, claiming wolves roamed the farmlands. But the truth was far worse. At night, shadows gathered at the edge of the village. Thin, pale figures missing their tongues, their jaws hanging open, their throats carved smooth like polished stone. They never made a sound. And yet somehow, in the deep hours of darkness, Mara often heard whispers outside her window. Whispers in voices that belonged to living people. Voices that should have been asleep. Voices that didn't belong to the tongueless at all, but mimicked the speech of those they planned to claim next. Mara's father, Rowan, had once spoken freely about the creatures, back when he still believed the village could be saved from them. He had been a historian, obsessed with tracing Harrowfield's past. The tongueless were not always this way, he told Mara when she was little. They were once the villagers themselves, betrayed, punished, and transformed. But before he could finish his research, the council forbade him from digging deeper. 2 weeks later, he vanished. No body, no trace, only silence thicker than before. Everyone whispered that the tongueless had taken him as a warning. Mara refused to accept it. She spent nights reading his hidden notes, discovering horrifying patterns. Every decade, exactly 13 villagers disappeared, and every disappearance began the same way, with a person hearing their own voice whispering to them in the dark. Mara had never heard her own voice outside her window until last night, when something perfectly mimicked her soft laugh. The realization chilled her. The tongueless didn't steal tongues to stop speech. They stole voices to lure their next victims, imitating them until the real person finally stepped into the dark. By the next morning, Mara felt certain she had been marked. As she walked through the village square, her unease grew. Every villager avoided eye contact, speaking only in short, clipped murmurs, as if afraid their voices might be stolen too. Some even pressed their hands to their throats when she passed, a silent warning she didn't understand. At the bakery, the elderly baker, Hessa, pulled her aside. "You heard it, didn't you?" she whispered. Mara nodded and the woman paled. "Then you must leave before nightfall. Your father tried to fight the harvest. They took him because he knew too much." Mara's breath caught. Harvest. That was the word Rowan had scribbled dozens of times in his notes, always circled in red. "What is the harvest, Hessa?" The baker shook her head, tears forming. "It is when they reclaim what was stolen from them. Blood, voice, memory. They take from us what we once took from them." But before Mara could ask more, a deep silence fell, thicker, colder. The baker's eyes widened in terror. She mouthed one last warning. "They're listening." That night, Mara packed her father's journals, intending to flee before darkness fully settled. But as she approached the village gate, she found it sealed with thick iron chains. Chains that hadn't been there that morning. A guard stepped forward, his expression empty. "No one leaves during the harvest," he said, though his lips barely moved, as if speaking caused him pain. Mara realized something unsettling. The guard's voice wasn't his. She had heard that smooth, hollow tone before, outside her window. She stepped back, heart pounding. The tongueless had already infiltrated the village, wearing voices like masks. As she ran home, shadows shifted behind her. Doors slammed, windows shuttered. It was as if every house knew the harvest had begun. When she reached her front door, she found a message carved into the wood. 3 words, jagged and uneven, as if scratched by trembling hands. "Run before echoes." Mara froze. Echoes, her father had warned about them. Echoes were not spirits but stolen voices, wandering ahead of the tongueless, calling victims by name. And now one of those echoes was whispering behind her, soft and familiar. "Mara, come here." Mara sprinted inside and bolted the door behind her, though she knew wood and metal meant nothing to the tongueless. She lit every candle she could find, casting trembling circles of light across the room. Shadows twitched at the edges, stretching unnaturally long, as if trying to slip closer. She opened her father's journal to the final pages, those he wrote the night before he vanished. The ink was smeared, the handwriting frantic. They were silenced for speaking the truth, cut out, erased, buried beneath us. But silence does not forget. It grows hungry. Mara felt her chest tighten. A drawing filled the next page. Dozens of tongueless figures rising from the ground, mouths open, voices leaking from them like smoke. Her father had scrawled a final note beside it. "They do not want revenge. They want replacement." Suddenly, the candles flickered out one by one. The whispering began again, this time hundreds of voices overlapping. Some she recognized, others impossibly old. They surrounded the house, calling her name with perfect imitation. And then, from deep within the chorus, she heard her father's voice say gently, "Open the door, Mara. Let us take your silence." Mara pressed her back against the door, her breath shallow and quick. The house trembled as if the voices themselves carried weight. Every window rattled. The air thickened with a cold so sharp it felt like needles brushing her skin. She forced herself to read the next journal page, hoping her father had left a way out. He had drawn a symbol, a circle of 13 lines radiating outward like a sun. Under it, he wrote, "The silence seal. Break it, and the harvest ends." Mara scanned the room, desperate. Then she saw it, carved into the wooden floor beneath the rug she had played on as a child. The same symbol hidden her entire life. As she knelt to touch it, the whispers outside rose into a violent chorus. The voices began slamming against the walls, bending the wood inward, as though trying to fold the house in half. Her father's voice roared above the others, no longer gentle, but commanding, "Do not touch the seal." Mara hesitated. If he didn't want her to break it, then what had he been trying to say? She leaned closer, and the center of the symbol began to pulse with faint, living light. The light grew brighter, illuminating the room in a pale, ghostly glow. Mara reached out, and the moment her fingertips touched the seal, the world around her vanished. She stood in a gray, endless field, surrounded by the tongueless. Hundreds of them, pale bodies swaying like reeds in dead wind. None attacked her. Instead, they stared with hollow eyes full of something worse than hatred, sorrow. A figure approached from the fog. Her father, his mouth hung open, tongue missing, throat carved smooth. Yet she heard him speak inside her mind. "We did not choose this." Images flooded her vision. Villagers long ago cutting out tongues, burying the victims alive under the fields to keep their secrets hidden. The tongueless were not monsters. They were prisoners of a curse born from betrayal. "Break the seal," he said. "End our suffering. End yours." As Mara felt herself being pulled back to reality, her father gave her one final look, not of horror, but of pleading. When she blinked, she was back in her house, the whispers now shrieking her name as the walls cracked and splintered. The seal pulsed beneath her hands like a beating heart. Mara braced herself as the house buckled. The front door bent inward, wooden fibers snapping like bones. The voices had grown monstrous, no longer imitations, but anguished screams of the damned. She slammed her hands against the glowing seal. The light flared, burning her skin. Black veins spread across the floorboards like roots. The tongueless were now inside the house, dozens of them crawling from the shadows, limbs jerking unnaturally, jaws opening in silent agony. One reached for her, its fingertips cold as grave soil, and for a moment, she saw the human it once had been. A young girl, terrified, begging without sound. Mara's heart twisted. She pressed harder on the seal. The symbol responded, splitting open like a cracked stone, revealing swirling white light beneath. A wind roared upward, pulling everything toward it. Shadows, dust, even the tongueless themselves. They clung to the walls, their bodies peeling away like ash. Their faces remained calm, accepting, hopeful. Outside, the sky tore apart with a thunderous scream as the ancient curse began unraveling. Mara felt her body lifting, drawn toward the light as voices cried out. Not in torment, but in relief. The wind intensified, pulling at Mara's hair and clothes. The tongueless were being lifted into the glowing vortex, one by one, dissolving into sparks of silver light. Their suffering was ending, finally. But the house itself was crumbling, beams snapping, roof collapsing inward. Mara held onto the seal, anchoring herself. A voice whispered behind her ear, a voice she recognized instantly. Her father. "You must let go. The seal needs a sacrifice." A living voice to replace the silence. Mara grit her teeth. "I'm not dying," she whispered. "There has to be another way." The wind roared louder, shaking the foundation. The seal split wider, the light almost blinding. Her father appeared in the glow, reaching toward her, not to pull her in, but to steady her. "You are not meant to die, Mara. You are meant to speak, for all of us." A warmth spread through her chest. She understood. She didn't need to give her life. She needed to give her voice. So she inhaled deeply, ignoring the pain, and screamed. A raw, powerful scream filled with every fear, every truth, every memory. The vortex swallowed her voice whole, and suddenly, the storm went still. Silence fell, but not the cursed, heavy silence that had plagued the village for centuries. This silence felt clean, peaceful. The light faded, and Mara collapsed onto the floor. When she opened her eyes, the tongueless were gone. Not dissolved, not erased, freed. The air shimmered softly with silver dust before settling like snow. Outside, dawn was breaking for the first time in years without a single whisper in the wind. Mara rose shakily and stepped out into the quiet village. Doors opened. Villagers peeked out, confused but alive. The darkness had lifted. As she walked to the village square, she felt an ache in her throat. Her voice was gone, completely, but in its place was something stronger. A strange warmth that pulsed like hope. She knelt beside the old well, placing her palm over her heart. Her silence had saved them. A gentle breeze stirred, not a whisper of danger, but a promise. And then she heard it, not with her ears, but deep in her mind. Dozens of voices, calm, grateful, finally free, speaking as one. "Thank you, Mara. We can rest now." And for the first time, the silence felt alive. The forest of Greywood had always been quiet at night, but on that evening, the silence shattered with a howl unlike anything human or animal. It wasn't a simple cry. It was hollow, vibrating, echoing like something calling from an empty cavern. Ethan froze beside the campfire, the hair on his arms rising as if the sound passed through him instead of around him. "Wolves," Jenna whispered, though she already knew the answer. Wolves didn't sound like that. Wolves didn't echo as if their bodies were empty. A second howl rose, deeper, closer. Ethan grabbed his flashlight, shining it toward the tree line. The light shook in his hand. The forest seemed to inhale, every branch bending inward as if bracing for what was coming. Leaves rustled, twigs snapped, and then silence, the oppressive kind, like the forest was holding its breath. Ethan swallowed hard. "We need to leave, now." But as they turned toward the car, something large moved between the trees. A shape low to the ground, fast, unnatural. Jenna whispered, "Ethan, something's hunting us." And from the darkness, glowing white eyes blinked. Eyes belonging to something that had no heartbeat. The creature stepped into the edge of the firelight, and Ethan's breath caught in his throat. It looked like a wolf, huge, towering, built for killing, but something was horribly wrong with it. Its abdomen was torn open, but not with blood or organs spilling out. Instead, the inside was completely empty, a hollow ribcage exposed like the frame of a broken drum. The ribs were sharp, jagged, and clinked softly as the beast breathed. Jenna staggered backward. That thing should be dead, but it wasn't dead. It moved with terrifying speed, its limbs long and unnatural, its movements jerky like a puppet pulled by invisible strings. The wolf tilted its head, and Ethan saw its jaw unhinge wider than any normal animal's, stretching into an impossible gape. A low growl escaped its throat, but the sound echoed not from its mouth, but from inside the hollow cage of its ribs. It was empty, yet alive, and starving. Ethan whispered, "Jenna, run." The hollow wolf lunged forward, claws digging into the dirt, dragging itself toward them with a hunger that felt ancient and merciless. Ethan and Jenna sprinted through the dark forest, dodging branches that whipped against their faces. Behind them, the hollow wolf crashed through the undergrowth, its hollow ribcage clattering like bones in a dying storm. The thing was fast, far faster than a normal wolf. Every few seconds, Ethan felt the ground tremble beneath heavy footfalls. "Don't look back," he shouted. But Jenna did. She saw the creature leap over a fallen log, its empty chest cavity glowing faintly with cold moonlight. Each time it landed, its ribs rattled violently, as though the beast's hunger shook its entire body. They reached a narrow slope, sliding down the dirt. The wolf followed without slowing, rolling and twisting in the air like it felt no pain. "Ethan, "This isn't an animal," Jenna cried. "I know." A tree root snagged Ethan's foot, sending him crashing to the ground. Pain shot through his ankle. Jenna skidded to help him, but the wolf was closing in, its breath a hollow whistle. Ethan forced himself up, limping. The hollow wolf emerged from the shadows, ribs wide open, ready to feed. Just when Ethan and Jenna thought the nightmare couldn't grow worse, a new sound filled the forest. A second echoing growl, deeper and more distorted than the first. Jenna's blood ran cold. "There's another one." Two glowing white eyes appeared to the left. The hollow wolf had a companion. This one was even more horrifying. Its back was torn open, spine exposed like a row of ivory blades. Each vertebra glistened wetly in the moonlight, dripping with black sap-like fluid that hissed when it touched the ground. "No, no, no, no," Ethan whispered. The second wolf moved silently, despite its deformities. Its body didn't move naturally. Its limbs shifted at angles no creature should be able to survive. The two wolves circled them, one growling from the front, the other cracking bones from behind. Ethan grabbed a broken branch as a weapon, but it felt useless against these abominations. Jenna tightened her grip on his arm. "We're dead." The first wolf lunged, and at that exact moment, a distant flare shot into the sky, bursting in red light. Someone else was in the forest, and they were signaling a warning. A figure emerged from the trees, illuminated by the fading red flare. He wore a thick, battered coat and carried a massive crossbow strapped to his back. His face was hidden behind a mask of blackened metal shaped like a wolf's skull. "Down!" he shouted. Ethan and Jenna dropped as a bolt flew past them, striking the first hollow wolf directly in the ribcage. The creature staggered, its hollow chest ringing like struck iron. The stranger reloaded with practiced speed. "Move! Don't let them surround you!" The second wolf sprinted toward him, jaw unhinging. He fired again. The bolt pierced through the beast's exposed spine. The wolf shrieked, but no breath came with the cry, only the clattering of loose bones. The wolves retreated into the shadows, circling at a distance. Ethan stared at the masked man. Who are you?" The stranger lifted his mask slowly. His eyes were tired, bloodshot, filled with years of terror. "I'm the only one left who knows how to kill them," Jenna asked, trembling. "Kill what? What are they?" He answered with a grim whisper. "They're not wolves. They're the forest's dead, walking without bodies." The stranger motioned for them to follow as he retreated deeper into the forest. Ethan hesitated, but the echoing rattles of the hollow wolves closing in left no room for argument. "We need higher ground," the man said. "The dead don't climb," Jenna whispered. "The dead?" He glanced back at her, face grim. "Those wolves were once people, hunters, wanderers, even children. The forest keeps their bones, empties them, and uses them." A chill crawled up Ethan's spine. They reached a rocky slope where twisted roots formed a natural staircase. As they climbed, the stranger kept scanning the darkness. Ethan asked, "You said you're the only one left. Left from what?" "A group," he said softly. "There were 12 of us. We came to cleanse the forest. But the dead learned. They hunted us at night. One by one." He exhaled shakily. "I've been alone for 6 years." A hollow howl erupted behind them, closer than ever. The stranger pulled them behind a boulder. "Stay low." Below the cliff, the two hollow wolves prowled the clearing, sniffing, searching. Jenna covered her mouth, shaking. The stranger whispered, "Once the forest claims a body, it never gives it back." And one of the wolves lifted its head, sniffing their scent. The wolves circled the clearing, their empty torsos rattling like wind chimes carved from human remains. Ethan tried to steady his breathing, but the sound of the beasts searching for them echoed off the rocks, bouncing back like cold whispers. The stranger nudged Ethan. "Listen carefully. Do you hear it?" Ethan strained his ears. First, nothing. Then, faint, like soft tapping, a rhythm. Jenna noticed it too. "What is that?" "They're bones," the stranger said. "They speak to the forest. They warn each other. Ethan's heart dropped. You're saying they know we're here? The man nodded. Suddenly, the second hollow wolf lifted its head sharply. The tapping in its spine grew louder as if responding to a silent call. Its empty ribcage expanded, then contracted with a sudden jerk, filling the air with a hollow shriek. They found us, the stranger hissed. He pulled a pouch from his coat and tossed a handful of black powder into the air. The powder burst into a cloud of sparks, creating a brief wall of red light. Move! Up the rocks! They scrambled upward as the wolves lunged through the fading glow. But as Ethan climbed, he heard something worse than the bones. The third howl. Higher. Younger. Something else was awake. From the treetops came a creature smaller than the others. Fast, bone-light, barely more than a skeleton wrapped in scraps of shadow. It scampered along the branches with unnatural agility, its empty eye sockets glowing faintly. Jenna gasped. They have young. The stranger's face twisted with sorrow. Children, the forest claimed. They're the most dangerous. They don't stalk. They jump. Before Ethan could react, the hollow cub dropped from above, landing inches from him. Its ribs clicked rapidly like teeth chattering in freezing cold. It lunged. The stranger shoved Ethan aside and fired. The bolt struck the cub's shoulder, but instead of falling, the creature split in two, its body separating like brittle glass. Both halves kept moving. What the hell? Ethan shouted. They don't die like adults, the man yelled. Run! The cubs, now two, scrambled up the rocks after them, their bone talons scraping stone like scalpels. The larger wolves howled below, the forest trembling in response. Ethan, Jenna, and the stranger reached a narrow ledge overlooking a steep ravine. There, the man pointed. A cave. They can't go inside. Why not? Jenna panted. Because that cave, he said, voice breaking, is where they were made. The entrance to the cave was narrow, formed of jagged stone that seemed to twist unnaturally inward, like the forest itself was trying to keep something contained. The moment the three stepped inside, the air changed, colder, heavier, carrying a metallic scent. Jenna gripped Ethan's arm. This place feels wrong. That's because it is, the stranger said. This is where the forest empties the dead, where it hollows them. As they ventured deeper, they saw carvings on the walls, shapes of wolves, humans, trees, and twisted forms merging together. The farther they walked, the more the stone seemed to pulse, as if alive. Ethan whispered, "How do you even know all this?" The stranger hesitated. Then, because my brother was the first hollow wolf. A cold silence filled the cave. Before Ethan or Jenna could ask more, a piercing scream echoed through the tunnels. One of the cubs scraping at the entrance, unable to enter but furious. They'll wait outside, the man said. But the adults, they'll try to break the rock if they have to. They continued forward until the tunnel opened into a large chamber. In the center lay a pit filled with bones, all swirling gently, as if something beneath them was breathing. The bones in the pit shifted with a rhythm, inhale, exhale, like a massive creature resting beneath the surface. Jenna stepped back, covering her mouth in horror. What is that?" she whispered. "It's the heart of the forest," the stranger said. "Where it feeds, where it creates the hollows." Ethan stared. "You're saying the forest is alive?" "Alive, hungry, and angry," the man replied. "For decades, it's taken bodies to rebuild itself. The wolves are how it moves." The pit suddenly heaved, bones rising like a wave. A large skull surfaced, human but stretched, warped, fused with tree roots. Its empty sockets glowed faintly, the same color as the wolf's eyes. Jenna screamed. Ethan pulled her back. The stranger loaded his crossbow. "We destroy this pit, we stop the wolves. Maybe even free the dead." "How?" Ethan asked. "Fire." But before he could strike, the cave shook violently. Outside, the hollow wolves howled, their voices merging into a single monstrous roar. The cubs screeched and hammered at the stone. The stranger cursed. The forest knows we're here. Roots began crawling down the walls like living snakes, and it's trying to seal us inside. The roots slithered down the walls, thick and pulsing like veins filled with black blood. Ethan swung his flashlight toward them just as one root snapped forward, wrapping around his ankle. He fell hard. Jenna grabbed his arms, pulling with all her strength as the root tightened, trying to drag him toward the pit. The stranger slashed the root with a curved hunting knife. Sap sprayed, dark, murky, and warm like spoiled blood. The root recoiled, screeching with a sound no plant should ever make. "Move," the stranger ordered. "The forest is awake now." More roots burst from the stone, gripping the ground like skeletal hands pulling themselves free. Jenna gasped. They're bodies. The roots, they're made of bodies. And she was right. Under the peeling bark were hints of skin, gray, stretched, embedded. Fingers fused into wood. Faces flattened into knots. The forest hadn't just absorbed the dead. It had woven them. The pit rumbled again, bones shifting. Something massive was trying to rise. "We don't have much time," the stranger said, loading another bolt. "If the heart wakes up fully." He didn't finish, because a wolf's hollow head slowly emerged from the pit. But this one was the size of a horse. The creature hauled itself from the pit. An enormous hollow wolf, its ribcage expanded like warped tree branches. Roots dangled from its jaws like torn tendons. Its glowing sockets locked onto them. Jenna whispered, "We're dead." "No," the stranger said, raising his crossbow. "Not yet." He fired. The bolt sank into the giant wolf's chest, but instead of staggering, the creature inhaled. The bolt shot back out, launched across the cave as if expelled by a vacuum. "What the hell?" Ethan shouted. "It's empty inside," the stranger said. "Nothing to pierce." The wolf roared, and the force of its hollow scream blasted dust and bones into the air. Smaller wolves howled outside, answering the call. Then the giant charged. The ground shook with every step. Ethan dove aside. Jenna rolled behind a fallen slab of stone. The stranger wasn't fast enough. A massive paw, made of interwoven femurs and bark, smashed into him, throwing him against the wall. His mask shattered. He collapsed, coughing blood. "Help me up," he rasped. Ethan grabbed him, pulling him upright. "We can't kill that thing," Ethan shouted. The stranger wiped blood from his mouth. "Not with bolts." He pointed at the furnace-like glow deep inside the creature's chest. "But maybe we burn it." The giant hollow prowled around the chamber, sniffing, its chest glowing like a dim furnace. Each breath rattled its bones. "We need fire big enough to reach its core," the stranger said. Ethan glanced at the pit. Bones cracked and shifted, releasing hot air. "What about that?" The stranger shook his head. "Too unpredictable. We'd be ash before it burns." Jenna pointed upward. "What about the ceiling? The roots? Can they burn?" A slow smile crossed the stranger's bloodied face. "Yes, and if they fall, they'll collapse the chamber on the pit. Trap the heart. Trap the wolves." The giant hollow wolf snarled, sensing their plan. "Ethan," Jenna yelled. "Flares. You still have 2. He fumbled through his pack. "Got them." The stranger loaded his last bolt. "Aim for the roots. When this hits, throw the flares." The giant wolf lowered its head, ready to charge again. The stranger fired. The bolt struck the ceiling, embedding deep into a thick bundle of roots. "Now!" Ethan lit both flares. Their red glow filled the chamber. Jenna grabbed one and hurled it upward. Ethan threw the second. The flares ignited the roots, and the forest screamed. Flames surged across the ceiling, racing along the roots like fire chasing veins. The chamber filled with crackling heat and raining sparks. The giant hollow reared back, screeching silently, its bones vibrating violently. Ethan shielded Jenna as a burning root snapped and crashed to the ground. "Keep moving!" the stranger yelled, limping toward the exit tunnel. But the forest wasn't going to let them go. The pit erupted, Bones launched into the air like shrapnel from an explosion. A wave of heat surged upward as the burning ceiling began to cave in. The giant hollow lunged at them one last time, but a flaming root fell directly onto its spine, pinning it to the ground. The creature writhed, its hollow chest glowing brighter until, boom, its core erupted, sending a blast of burning air that shook the entire chamber. The heart of the forest screamed again, louder, deeper, angrier. Ethan stumbled, nearly falling into the shaking pit. Jenna grabbed him. Run! Together they sprinted toward the tunnel. Behind them, the stranger stayed back, lighting another flare, throwing it directly into the pit. "Burn, you monster," he whispered. The chamber collapsed. The tunnel shook as Ethan and Jenna sprinted through it, choking on smoke. Hot air blasted past them as the chamber behind collapsed fully, sealing the pit beneath tons of flaming rubble. They burst into the open forest, only to see fire spreading through the trees like a living wave. The hollow wolves outside were staggering, their bodies collapsing as the burning roots severed their connection to the heart. One wolf tried to lunge at Ethan, but it fell apart mid-air, its bones scattering like dry leaves. "We did it," Jenna gasped. "We actually..." A violent cough interrupted her. The stranger stumbled out of the tunnel behind them, barely alive, covered in ash and blood. "You destroyed the heart?" Ethan asked. The man nodded weakly. "It'll burn for hours, maybe days. The forest won't remake itself again." He looked at them with exhausted eyes. "You survived something no one else ever has." The ground trembled one last time, and then the forest fell silent. Completely silent. Ethan exhaled shakily. "Let's get out of here." As they walked away, the flames behind them devoured the last of the hollow wolves, and the forest finally died. The forest had grown impossibly silent. No wind, no insects, not even the distant rustle of branches. It was as if the entire wilderness was holding its breath, waiting for the final act to unfold. Nathan staggered between the trees, each step heavier than the last, the metallic scent of blood rising from the deep gouges across his arms. He wasn't sure how long he had been running, minutes, hours, or an eternity, but he knew one thing. Whatever was hunting him was no longer behind him. It was all around him. Shadows twisted unnaturally between the trunks, moving without sound, without shape, without mercy. He could hear whispers drifting through the dark, voices that didn't belong to any living creature. They called his name not as a warning, but as a welcome. His flashlight flickered once, twice, then died. Total darkness swallowed him whole. Nathan forced himself to breathe, to think, to believe there was still a way out. But when he reached the clearing, he froze. The trees formed a perfect circle, and in the center lay the remnants of countless others who had tried to escape before him. And above them, glowing in the darkness, were the same eyes that had followed him since the moment he stepped into the forest. He finally understood. No one ever leaves these woods, not alive. Blackwater was never a loud town. Its streets were always quiet, its nights darker than they should be. But silence didn't mean safety. 40 years ago, the town was terrorized by a man they called the Butcher. He didn't just kill. He carved his victims with surgical precision, removing pieces as if choosing cuts of meat. When he finally died in a fire that burned his shop to ashes, the entire town breathed again. But peace never lasts in Blackwater. One cold October morning, Sheriff Lorne discovered something horrifying outside the old butcher shop ruins. A trail of fresh blood leading to the basement door, a door that had been sealed since the fire. The prints in the blood weren't random, they looked like someone dragging a heavy body. And next to the door was the same mark the butcher used to carve on his victims. A small X inside a circle. Everyone believed the butcher was long gone. But now, the town whispered the same question in trembling voices. If he died 40 years ago, who made the mark? 2 days later, the first body appeared. It was found hanging from a hook behind Miller's barn, suspended like an animal ready to be processed. The victim, a local farmer named Reed Hallman, had been missing for barely 12 hours. Yet the condition of his body looked like someone had worked on him for days. His arms were sliced open, ribs exposed, and his torso hollowed with terrifying skill. There was no sign of struggle, not even a defensive wound. Reed hadn't fought. He never had the chance. Pinned to his chest was a strip of butcher paper with a message written in dripping red ink. Cut of the day. The handwriting matched records from the original butcher case. Sheriff Lorne felt his stomach twist. Either someone was copying a dead man with disturbing accuracy, or the butcher was back in a way no one could understand. Before Reed's body was taken down, Lorne noticed something even worse. The skin around the wounds was warm. The body was still fresh. Whoever had done this finished only minutes before the discovery. The next night, a heavy metallic smell drifted through Main Street. People woke up nauseous, some vomiting, others covering their faces as the air thickened with the stench of raw meat. Old residents recognized it instantly, the same smell that filled the town during the butcher's killing spree. Sheriff Lorne followed the odor to the burned butcher shop. The ashes were long cold, yet smoke curled upward from a crack in the ground, and beneath it he could hear something faint. A slow, wet drip, drip, drip. When he pried open the cracked flooring, the sheriff dropped his flashlight in shock. Beneath the ruins was a hidden chamber, one never mentioned in the original investigation. Hooks dangled from the ceiling, chains rattled with each breath of wind, and the floor was covered in thick, coagulated blood that couldn't be 40 years old. Someone had been using this place recently. On the far wall, written in crimson smears, were 4 chilling words. The butcher never left. The sheriff stepped back, trembling. Either someone was staging a nightmare, or the fire decades ago hadn't killed the monster they thought it had. That same night, the townspeople reported strange noises echoing beneath their floors. Scratching, dragging, low groans that made their bones vibrate. Some swore they heard whispers calling their names. Sheriff Lorne stayed near the butcher shop ruins, determined to catch whoever was behind the horror. Around 3 a.m., a cold draft swept through the area, carrying a sound that froze him in place. A voice, a deep, rasping voice rising from the hidden chamber. Lorne, still hunting ghosts? His blood turned to ice. The voice belonged to Gregory Hale, the original butcher. Lorne had heard his recorded interrogations dozens of times. The tone, the mocking laughter, it was unmistakable. But Gregory Hale was dead. Before he could react, chains inside the chamber clattered violently, as if something huge was crawling upward. The ground trembled. The smell of rotting flesh thickened until Lorne felt his throat close. He shone his flashlight down. 2 pale hands gripped the ladder from below, hands with blackened nails and blood embedded deep in the creases. Hands that shouldn't exist anymore. Sheriff Lorne stumbled back as the figure emerged from the darkness below. At first, it looked like a man, tall, broad-shouldered, but as it climbed higher, its features twisted into something neither alive nor dead. The skin along its arms was stitched together with thick black thread, as if someone had reassembled it piece by piece. Muscles pulsed unnaturally beneath pale flesh, and its eyes glowed a deep crimson, like burning coals buried in a skull. Gregory Hale, the butcher, was standing before him, but not as a man resurrected, as something rebuilt. Hale tilted his head, bones cracking loudly. "They buried me wrong," he growled. "Blackwater owes me flesh." Before Lorne could draw his gun, the creature moved faster than anything human. It lunged forward, grabbing the sheriff by the coat and lifting him off the ground with one hand. The smell of blood radiated from its body like steam. "You can't stop what's already been carved," the butcher whispered. And with that, he threw Lorne across the rubble as if he weighed nothing, preparing for the slaughter he had waited 4 decades to finish. Sheriff Lorne hit the ground hard, his ribs screaming with pain. Dust filled his lungs as he forced himself back onto his elbows. The butcher advanced slowly, each step leaving a wet imprint on the broken concrete. Blood, fresh, dark, and dripping from his reconstructed arms. Why are you here? Lorne gasped, struggling to breathe. Hale cracked his knuckles, the sound echoing like breaking bones. I never left, he said calmly. They tried to burn me, but flesh remembers, and so does hate. Lorne crawled backward, pulling his revolver with trembling fingers. He fired once, a clean shot to the chest. The butcher didn't flinch. He simply looked down at the wound as thick, blackened blood oozed out slowly. That won't work on something patched together, Hale murmured. He grabbed Lorne by the leg and dragged him toward the hidden chamber. The sheriff screamed, clawing at the floor, leaving streaks of blood from his torn hands. Hale leaned close to his ear. Blackwater forgot me, he whispered. I will help them remember. And with one violent pull, he dragged Lorne into the darkness below. At sunrise, Blackwater woke to a sound it hadn't heard in 40 years. The butcher's bell, a chilling clang, 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 echoing across the streets. People stepped out of their homes in confusion and dread. The bell had only ever rung for one reason, when the butcher prepared a new cut. Deputy Mara, the sheriff's second-in-command, raced toward the sound. Her boots splashed through streaks of blood trailing along the pavement, all leading to the ruined shop. When she reached the entrance, her stomach turned. The basement door was wide open, and hanging above it was the sheriff's badge, impaled on a butcher's hook. No, Lorne, she whispered, her voice breaking. Before she could step inside, a sudden gust of warm, metallic air hit her. It carried the unmistakable smell of organs and smoke. Then came another sound, a dragging noise, slow, steady, wet. Mara raised her gun, hands shaking, as a shadow moved inside the chamber. Something heavy scraped against the concrete, coming closer. She called out, "Sheriff!" A moment of silence. Then a voice answered, but it wasn't his. "The next cut is ready." Mara didn't wait to see what was coming. She ran fast toward the center of town. As she reached Main Street, she froze. Blood covered the asphalt in a long, winding trail. It slid between cracks in the road, pooled around street drains, and dripped from lamp posts. People gathered in terrified clusters, whispering prayers, covering their mouths. At the end of the bloody path stood something horrific. A table, a butcher's table, old, rusted, and stained, but newly cleaned in the center, as if prepared for fresh work. On top of it lay a body wrapped tightly in butcher paper, tied with twine. A tag hung from the string. Mara's heart pounded as she stepped closer. She read the tag. She screamed, "Sheriff Lorne, special cut." Before she could uncover the body, the ground vibrated beneath her. Metal groaned. Lights flickered. The air turned hot and thick, because the butcher was near, very near, and the people of Blackwater finally understood. This wasn't a copycat. This wasn't a prank. This was the return of a nightmare carved from flesh, one that wanted to finish what it started. Before Mara could call for backup, a scream ripped through the air. A scream filled with agony so raw that everyone in Main Street froze. It came from the roof of the old post office. When people looked up, they saw something dangling. A human arm, fresh, still dripping. Carved into the skin were words, jagged and deep. "Remember me." Mara's breath caught in her throat. The handwriting, the cuts. She recognized them. The butcher's signature. Suddenly, the lights across the street flickered again. One by one they went out, plunging everything into a suffocating dimness. Then, out of the shadows, stepped the butcher. He dragged a massive cleaver along the ground, the blade screeching against the pavement. His body steamed with heat, as if the fire that once killed him still burned inside. People ran in every direction, but the butcher didn't chase them. He stared directly at Mara. "You should have left me buried," he growled. "Now the whole town will pay the debt." He lifted the cleaver and pointed it at the sheriff's wrapped body on the table. Mara forced herself forward, her breathing rapid and sharp. She approached the butcher's table cautiously, praying that the sheriff was still alive under the wrapping. Her fingers trembled as she untied the twine. She peeled back the first layer of paper. Warmth hit her fingertips, then blood, and then she saw the face. But it wasn't the sheriff. It was Reed Hallman, the first victim, reassembled. His chest had been stitched shut with dark thread. His eyes were open, glassy, and lifeless. A message was carved into his forehead. The cut was practice. Mara stumbled back as the butcher's voice rose behind her. "I needed a warm-up," he growled. "Lorne is for later." Mara grabbed her radio and shouted, "All units, the butcher is alive!" But she didn't finish. A chain whipped from the darkness, wrapping tightly around her ankle. She screamed as she was yanked off her feet and dragged across the blood-smeared pavement. The butcher loomed over her. "Now," he said softly, "let's prepare the next piece." Mara's nails scraped against the concrete as the butcher dragged her deeper into the ruin. Her radio crackled somewhere behind her, useless now. The air grew colder, thicker, carrying the metallic sting of old blood. He pulled her into a chamber lit by a single hanging bulb, flickering weakly. Tools hung from the walls, rusted cleavers, bone saws, and hooks still dripping from whatever had been placed on them minutes earlier. The centerpiece of the room was a long steel table, its surface stained black with years of forgotten horrors. "Blackwater stopped my work," the butcher said, voice rumbling like something dead learning to speak again. "But I kept practicing, even underground." Mara kicked at him, hitting his knee. He barely flinched. He shoved her onto the table, leather straps snapping closed around her wrists and ankles. "You're stronger than the others," he murmured. "Good. I need someone who lasts." Mara stared at the ceiling, trying not to hyperventilate as he reached for a bone saw. The blade screeched as it spun to life. "Let's start," he whispered, "with the ribs." Sheriff Lorne awoke with a jolt, coughing dust from his lungs. Pain shot through his ribs, but he forced himself up. He had been tossed like a rag doll, but somehow, miraculously, still alive. He stumbled toward the station ruins, searching desperately for his radio, his weapon, anything. Then he heard it. A scream. Mara's. Lorne's blood ran cold. He followed the echo into the old slaughterhouse, every instinct screaming for him to run the opposite direction. But he'd promised Mara's father years ago he would watch over her. He couldn't fail her now. Inside, the smell hit him like a wall, copper, rot, and something disturbingly sweet. He moved silently between the rusted machinery, his gun shaking in his hand. Then he saw shadows shifting beneath the doorway. A buzzing sound. A saw. "Mara," he whispered, voice cracking. He pushed the door open. The butcher leaned over Mara, the spinning saw inches from her ribs. She clenched her jaw, refusing to give him the satisfaction of hearing her beg. Just as the blade touched the fabric of her shirt, bang! The bullet struck the wall beside the butcher's head. He froze. Slowly, he turned, crimson eyes burning with fury. Sheriff Lorne stood in the doorway, gun raised, breathing hard. "Step away from her," he said, voice trembling but steady enough. The butcher smiled, a horrifying stretch of stitched skin. "You came broken," he growled. "Good. I'll fix you next." He charged. Lorne fired again and again, but the rounds barely slowed the creature. Each bullet hit with a wet thud, sinking into flesh that refused to die. The butcher slammed into Lorne, sending them both crashing into a metal rack. Tools clattered to the floor. Mara twisted against her restraints, panic rising. She had only minutes, maybe seconds, before the sheriff joined the others on the table. Lorne struggled beneath the butcher's weight, feeling ribs strain as the creature pressed down. He reached blindly, grabbing the first tool his hand touched, a heavy bone hook. With a desperate shout, he swung upward. The hook tore through the butcher's stitched shoulder. The creature roared, jerking back in shock and rage. Lorne scrambled to his feet, wheezing, blood dripping from his mouth. Mara screamed from the table, "Lorne, the straps, hurry!" He stumbled to her side, sawing at the restraints with the hook's edge. His vision blurred, every breath a battle. Behind them, the butcher staggered, then steadied himself. His flesh writhed, threads tightening, repairing. "I built this body to last," he growled, stepping closer. "You can't break what's already reforged." The final strap snapped. Lorne grabbed Mara's arm. "Run!" But before they reached the doorway, the butcher swung a cleaver, striking the metal frame beside their heads with a terrifying clang. "You're not leaving," he snarled. Mara pulled Lorne toward the stairwell leading to the furnace room. It was the only place the butcher hadn't reinforced with chains and tools. They ran down the steps as the butcher's footsteps thundered behind them, shaking dust from the ceiling. The old furnace still burned faintly, flames licking the air like hungry tongues. Lorne leaned against the wall, coughing violently. "Mara, the heat. Maybe it's his weakness." She understood instantly. The creature was stitched, reassembled, patched together with unnatural materials. Maybe heat could melt, weaken, or tear those seams. The butcher entered the room slowly, savoring their fear. "You run well," he said, "but all cuts end the same." Mara grabbed an iron rod from beside the furnace. Its end glowed orange. "Come closer then," she said. "Let's finish your masterpiece." The butcher rushed forward. She swung. The burning rod sank into his chest. For the first time, he screamed in agony. His threads snapped, flesh tearing apart as smoke curled from the wound. But he didn't fall. He stepped toward her, roaring, and behind her, Lorne pulled a lever. The furnace door burst open with a blast of fire. The blast of fire roared outward like a living beast, swallowing the room in orange light. The butcher staggered back, his stitched skin blistering instantly. The flames clung to him like hungry hands, devouring the unnatural flesh. Mara shielded her face from the heat as Lorne collapsed beside the furnace, breathless. The butcher's roar filled the chamber, a mixture of fury, pain, and something almost human. He stumbled toward them, arms burning, threads snapping one after another. "You think fire can undo me?" he growled, voice breaking apart like cracking bone. Mara grabbed Lorne, pulling him toward the far side of the room. "Stay behind me," she yelled. The butcher lunged, his massive fist slamming into the ground where they had just been. Molten skin dripped from his arm as he tried to rise again. But the flames spread faster. His chest opened along a seam, revealing blackened muscle and flickering embers trapped inside him. Lorne whispered, "He's falling apart. Keep him in the heat." Mara grabbed a metal pipe and pushed with all her strength, forcing the butcher closer to the open furnace door. His scream shook the walls. The butcher swung wildly, catching Mara across the shoulder with a burning hand. She cried out but didn't fall. He grabbed the pipe she was using and crushed it in his fist like clay. "Blackwater belongs to me," he snarled, voice dissolving in the flames. His body sagged, melting, but his strength remained monstrous. With one final surge, he lunged toward Lorne. But Mara leapt onto his back, wrapping her arms around his throat. The heat scorched her skin instantly, but she held on, screaming through the pain. "You're not taking anyone else." The butcher thrashed violently, slamming her against the furnace door. Sparks burst around them. Mara reached for the chain hanging above the furnace, its control lever. She yanked it. The furnace door locked open permanently. A vortex of flame roared outward, engulfing the butcher entirely. His stitches snapped like popping wires. His flesh sloughed off in sheets, and underneath, the framework of something inhuman. Steel rods, bone fragments, blackened sinew began to collapse. The butcher's legs buckled as the inferno devoured what remained of him. Half his face melted away, revealing a charred skull beneath glowing red eyes that dimmed like fading embers. He reached toward Mara one last time, but his arm crumbled into ash before it could touch her. His torso bent inward, collapsing like wet paper. Lorne dragged himself toward her, coughing blood. Mara moved back. She stumbled away from the furnace as the butcher's core, an unnatural mass of bone, metal and sewn muscle, began to glow bright white, pulsed, once, twice, then exploded into a cloud of burning fragments. The blast knocked them both to the floor. When the fire settled, only a pile of smoking ash remained where the butcher had stood. A final hiss escaped the heap. The last thread burned away. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The slaughterhouse was silent except for the crackling of dying embers. Mara pushed herself upright, her skin blistered, clothes scorched, but alive. Lorne lay against the wall, breathing shallowly. "He's really gone?" she whispered. Lorne nodded weakly. "Ashes. Don't come back." But Mara wasn't so sure. The butcher had already defied death once, rebuilt himself with hatred and bone-deep obsession. Could something like that ever truly die? She looked at the furnace. Flames still swirled inside, hungry, eager. If anything else remained of him, it was already being consumed. Finally, she exhaled. "Let's get out of here." She helped Lorne to his feet, and together they limped toward the exit. Outside, dawn had begun to break over Blackwater, painting the sky with soft colors that felt painfully out of place after the horrors they'd survived. But they were alive, and the butcher wasn't. Hours later, firefighters and deputies arrived, sealing off the ruins. Mara sat on the back of an ambulance, bandages wrapped around her burned arms. Lorne spoke with the deputies, insisting over and over that the threat was gone. But as the investigators searched the furnace room, one of them called out, "Sheriff, you need to see this." Mara and Lorne exchanged a tense look and hurried inside. The furnace had cooled, leaving only ash and warped metal behind. But at the center of the ash pile lay something small, a single black thread, unburned, untouched by flame. Mara felt a chill crawl down her spine. Lorne bent down, frowning. "How?" Before he could finish, the thread twitched. Just once. Mara whispered, voice trembling, "Destroy it, now." A deputy grabbed metal tongs and tossed the thread back into the furnace. This time, Mara pulled the lever herself. The flames roared to life, consuming the thread completely. No motion, no sound, nothing left behind. Only when it turned to white dust did she finally breathe. "Now," she said softly, "he's gone." They thought the butcher of Blackwater was finally gone, burned, shattered, erased from the world. But evil doesn't die the way people do. It hides, it waits, and sometimes all it needs is a single thread to stitch itself back together. So if you ever pass by the old slaughterhouse on a quiet night, and you hear metal scraping, or chains dragging across the floor, don't look back, because the butcher might be looking for a new piece to finish his masterpiece.